And so, with those tremendous, terrible words in the voice of Ramfis, we start our blog today. I think I should be sharing with you some background on what we are about to hear because of course now you know that we are talking about Aida, but what you see on stage might be a little weird. We will get back to that later in this entry, but for now, let's enjoy this amazing part written by our very much dear Maestro Giuseppe Verdi in regards to, I have to confess, this is one of my favorite mezzo-soprano roles. Maybe the one I enjoy the most. I will be explaining why. So I understand that I am biased towards my preference for Amneris. Of course, that doesn't mean that there are not other many great mezzo-soprano roles. But let's stop my talking here and let's listen to this scene, which I know you will identify immediately.
Radames, tua fede io asti, alla patria spergiuro, al re, all'onor. Discolpati, discolpati,
Elitace, traditor.
Se deciso il tuo fare, e infamia la morte tu avrai, sotto l'aba del nome segnato, sotto l'aba del nome segnato, a te dico che ha scuso la pelle.
E si chiamano ministri dal cielo. Empia razza, compiste un delitto.
Sacerdote, compiesti un delitto, ti ricordati di sanguasate, poi la terra di nubi oltraggiate. Potete di colpi mandate,
E te la ritorno, parrà,
tutti quest'uomo che uccidi, tu lo sai, tanto già amato. La nativa di nubi oltraggiate. Sa sangue, s'apperricherà.
e te la ritorno, parrà,
Poi la terra e nubi oltraggiate.
parrà.
And so we're watching part of the recording that took place. Well, in fact, I have to confess that I had to look for that information because it was not really available on the video on YouTube. So I found that this is a recording from the city of Guatemala in Central America. Guatemala, year 2005. It appears to be in the open in a place called El Campo Marte of the city. And I will also explain why I chose to share this one with you. And Maybe we should start with one phrase that I'm pretty sure that some of you may have already heard in the past. What voice or what does it take for a singer to sing opera? And it is said that the simple answer is you need a voice. You don't have voice, it is impossible for you to sing opera. And it certainly seems to be the case for Amneris. Because when we talk about Amneris, and let's start with the qualities or the requirements of the voice, Amneris needs a strong, powerful voice. Better with a brilliant, great squillo. The reason is pretty simple. As you could hear now, there is going to be a huge orchestration because Maestro Verdi, and we all know that Maestro Verdi liked to make life of singers very difficult because Maestro Verdi put this immense, huge, heavy orchestration, and so the singers have to compete many times with the sounds of the orchestra. And sometimes there is also a choir. So a choir, a full heavy orchestration, and opposite to you being Amneris, you have a spinto or dramatic voice of Aida with whom you have to face a duet, and you also have a spinto or dramatic tenor, which is going to be Radames, and with whom you also have a duet. It If you don't want to fall behind, you really need to be a powerful mezzo soprano voice. You could say, and we know that there has been great Aidas in the past, just to name a couple of them. Of course, Giulietta Simeonato, one of the greatest Amneris of all times. Of course, we have also Maestra Auralia Dominguez and a very impressive Amneris, of whom I have referred to in several episodes in the podcast as well. But today we are not talking about those great singers of the past. Today we are talking about a more recent voice. We are talking about the Mexican mezzo-soprano Belém Rodriguez. And I wanted to share with you a personal anecdote around Belém Rodriguez. I had the opportunity of watching around that year, also 2005. I had also the opportunity of watching Aida being at the Palacio de Bellas Artes in Mexico, and I noticed the name Belém Rodriguez, of whom I knew very little, and I noticed she was facing Amneris. So I remember that I was so nervous, maybe more nervous than Belém, because I told myself, oh my God, because the duet with Aida, not easy, of course, but she could get away with it. But starting, approaching the end of the opera, after that tremendous scene as well, where Radames, Aida, and Amonasro the latest managed to convince Radames so that he reveals a secret and he raps with that tremendous scene as well. Sacerdote ionote. That one, after that one, and now we go back to the scene where we have again Radames, but now we have Amneris, and Amneris starts. I think this is the longest scene ever written for a mezzo. She's singing 60, 70% of the time for around 15 to 20 minutes, maybe, because it starts with the duet with Radames, which is very, very difficult, where she offers to save him, to rescue him, and he refuses because he prefers to keep loyal to Aida, which of course makes Amneris very, very mad. And then there is this judgment scene of which we saw a part where he's accused, the charges are being read, and so he's being condemned. Traditor! Elitace traditor, and then, like a thunder, arrives in the middle of all the voices, the powerful voice of Amneris. Allo salvate numi pieta, numi pieta. And you may think that it is easy to do, but if you're a mezzo yourself, or if you're an opera singer yourself, try to sing the notes with the volume, with the desperation that she has to do it. I can tell you that the three times that she goes for the same "Allo salvate no mi pieta, no mi pieta," it's super, super difficult. Also because the pieta is a low note. So Amneris has to go from very, very intense emotion, very, very powerful and desperate sound in the voice, and also reaching her lowest notes by the end of that phrase for three times, which adds to the difficulty. And now she has to, what we are going to be listening a little later, and how she wraps it up. And now she's going to face her highest note in this opera, which is going to be a si bemol or a B flat. In the lowest note she reaches in this opera a G3. So the mezzo is really facing very, 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 very interesting vocal challenges. I have talked about this super long scene, the heavy voices she has to face, the powerful orchestration, but we also have to say that she has to have a very solid middle voice because otherwise she won't be able to get away with it. Not only that she has great high notes, but she needs to have a powerful middle notes because if she does not have the right support on her chest voice, this is just going to be a mess. Nobody's going to be able to hear her, and she needs to be comfortable vocally if anybody can ever be comfortable vocally singing Amneris. I recall also the anecdote of another great mezzo, closer to contralto, Belén Amparán, who sang, by the way, Carmen along with Franco Corelli, and an anecdote by her own daughter who said that when she had to sing Amneris, she really was very, very nervous the whole week previous to the performance because it is a very, very difficult, high, heavy role. And so, and I also mentioned earlier that Amneris is by far my preferred mezzo soprano role, but it doesn't mean that there are not other mezzo soprano roles written by Maestro Verdi and other composers. And I would think that stands at Azucena from Il Trovatore stands very close in difficulty to Amneris, but Amneris by far, to me, it's the most difficult one based on the interpretation, on the heaviness of the orchestration, on the duration of her scene, and on the range of the voice that she has to cover, along with the opposite voices that she has to sing, heavy voices from from Aida and Radames. I also think that we need to mention, because I did it in previous entries, blog entries, that a role like Azucena herself, like Amneris, like Scarpia in Tosca, are what I call catalyzers. If they are not present, if you don't have an Amneris, there is not really an Aida, because Amneris is what expedites or makes things happen. So it is not because people just say, it is just, uh, Radames and Aida are the main roles, and Amneris might be just like a primary but closer to a secondary. That is not true. You take Amneris out of the equation and nothing would happen. Amneris is a key role in this opera. And with that being said, the strongest emotions, because she's like a tigress, Amneris is like a tigress, she has to carry the dynamics, the intense emotions, and evolution of the drama in the opera. And if you remember, the last notes that are being heard in the opera are, in fact, Amneris's words. Once Aida and Radames are being buried alive, the final words that one hears is Pace ti imploro, pace, pace, pace. And it has to match the emotion of the moment, which is, um, I don't recall I have ever heard or read it from any mezzo-soprano who has sung it, but really this role leaves them exhausted, leaves them not only exhausted physically speaking, but mentally speaking, because it really demands a lot. Those confrontation scenes, that super long scene, and at the end to be in that state of griefness, of pain, and saying, Pace, Pace, peace, peace, I begging for peace. I also wanted to mention that going back to the recording that we are sharing on the screen that comes from a year 2005 in the city of Guatemala. And of course, at this point, many will say, but we have the great production year, blah, 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 from the Scala. And we have another copy of Leontine Prize or blah, blah, blah at the Met. Or we also had at Covent Garden, blah, blah, blah. Yes, we know there are, and I know there are, as an overall, there are much better recordings of Aida. But what I wanted to share is, in one hand, the very great voice of Belén Rodriguez, which from my perspective is by far the greatest singer on stage that day. Belén Rodriguez is Amneris. She is really Amneris. She has in her voice everything that is needed from this super difficult role in the one hand, but we also have to acknowledge that by just looking at what we have on the screen, the costumes and the staging are really weird. The orchestra has its challenges as well. The director falls behind or does also some very weird things. The choir is not at its best either. So, with all those areas of opportunity, but only Belém Rodriguez as the great Amneris, why am I sharing this one? Because it is important to understand that opera is not only the opera in France. The opera is not the only thing that happens in Salzburg, or the only thing that happens at the Teatro Colón in Buenos Aires, or the Scala, or the Met, or Covent Garden, or Sydney Opera House. Opera happens in many other places. It only happens with their own resources. With that having said, and if you want to take some over a little over 2 hours to watch the entire Aida that was presented in the year 2005, please do so. I want to warn you that unfortunately the scene for the complete heavy scene for Amneris is not there. They didn't record the part of the duet with Radames, and the part of this the judgment scene is not complete either. But still, you have the opportunity of listening to, from my perspective, one of the greatest Amneris of the latest years, and probably could be facing some of the best ones from the past. So we reach the final part of her tremendous scene, of her magnificent scene.